This video is a follow-up to the last video, which was a Forsaken Survivor concept. In order to really understand what's being talked about here, you're going to want to watch that video first. I'd like to start this video off by thanking everybody who provided constructive feedback on the initial concept, since that feedback is what inspired me to make this follow-up. Now, I'm going to blast through a couple of the smaller changes right now, since they aren't really super big. First, the stamina boost from Witch's Brew is getting reduced to 110 from 150. This is because 150 stamina is a lot more than I thought it would be, and it would make Brood Emmet impossible to escape from. 110 is the same stamina as some of the killers, so I feel like that's a reasonable stamina boost for this concept. Second, the knife is being swapped out for a sword. The only reason I chose to use a knife in the original concept is because I didn't want to steal Shedletsky's whole sword thing, but to be honest, a knife just doesn't fit the character design I have, considering the big sword on my back. Finally, Sacrificial Stab is being removed from the concept for reasons I'll get into later on. While I really like the idea of this ability a lot, it just doesn't mesh at all with the rest of the kit. I'd also like to clarify some things regarding the concept that were vague to a lot of people and caused some confusion. First, ideally it would take 20 or more successful hits to kill a killer. This is a lot more than the killer would need to successfully kill Emmet in Brood state. So I'm pretty sure most of the issues people had with that aspect of the concept stem from me not providing a specific swing count to kill the killer. Second, both Sacrificial Stab and Witch's Brew are one-time use. I kinda thought that this was obvious, considering I never gave them any explicit cooldowns, but I suppose I should have been explicit about that. And finally, Forsaken Emmet being a self-insert is an aspect of his character that plays a crucial role in how he is characterized. He isn't an unkillable Mary Sue simply because he has the ability to kill the killer and is a self-insert character. I'll talk more about how Forsaken Emmet is actually supposed to be characterized later in this video, but I just wanted to clear the air early here since I'm tired of people brushing off the concept over this. I put in a decent amount of thought and effort into making this concept, and to have people ignore all of that and brush it off as a Mary Sue is very frustrating to me, since it completely ignores the core ideas behind the concept. With all that out of the way, let's jump into the first concern I saw people have with the concept. One of the biggest concerns that people had with the design of Witch's Brew was that it would be very disruptive to the gameplay of Forsaken, since it would easily facilitate an unfun camping meta. With the unrestricted nature of Witch's Brew in the initial concept, it was sort of obvious that the meta would be to pop your brew as soon as possible, and then allow your team to rally around you and camp a single area. Now, for the record, I do think that this camping strategy is a valid strategy to use, considering that there is proper counterplay that the killer can use to counter this, but I will concede to the fact that being able to set up this camp immediately at the start of a round would be really unfun for everyone involved. Now, in defense of the initial concept, using your Witch's Brew this early in order to camp like this would be more of a detriment to the team than anything, since you lose the powerful area denial capabilities of Brood State in favor of locking down a single position. However, this would still be a very powerful tool that you're seemingly given for free and heavily disrupts the gameplay almost immediately, which is terrible design on my part. Thankfully, Knoxfall1051 left a comment with an incredibly smart way of making this ability and the strategies that come with its use feel earned and more fair. Instead of having Witch's Brew available right off the bat, you're actually going to have to earn the ability to use it by meeting one of two round conditions. Condition 1, all generators get fixed, and Condition 2, half of the survivors are killed. These conditions change how both teams strategize and play the game without being incredibly disruptive to the flow of gameplay. For survivors, they will want to prioritize fixing generators even more in order to allow Emmet to use his brew as soon as possible. It still takes a while, and it's still just as risky for survivors to fix generators, but now there is a more apparent and immediate benefit to doing it. Additionally, by also allowing Witch's Brew to be used once half of the survivors are dead, the overall utility of the brew becomes a lot less powerful since there are less teammates to support Emmet during his attacks. And for the killer, their early round target priority shifts from focusing on Elliot to focusing on Emmet. Killing Emmet as soon as possible would be a priority for the killer, which is sort of how Elliot is right now. I'm a huge fan of this balancing tool, since it really solidifies Emmet's role as a support specialist. It also makes Witch's Brew feel more powerful and important without actually buffing the ability. It also makes the presence of Emmet a lot more impactful in the game without making him overpowered or unfun to play with. Again, I'd like to thank Knoxfall1051 for giving me this idea. It's a really good one. Another concern that I saw a few people have with this concept is the idea that Witch's Brew would be overpowered during Last Man Standing, since you'd just be able to run away and stall with the boosted stats. This is a very good point, and to be honest, I can't even really defend the original concept in regards to this concern. I never even bring up Last Man Standing once in that concept. Initially, I thought that maybe having it so that the brew and seeing red instantly pop as soon as Last Man Standing occurs would be a good idea. But then I realized that it would cause more problems, since if you're across the map from the killer, you'd have no reason to approach him or actually engage in a big epic 1v1 last stand. So here's what we're going to do. Sacrificial Stab is no longer part of Emmet's kit for multiple reasons. One, as I said earlier, it just doesn't mesh well with the rest of the concept. And two, it's being replaced with a new passive ability called Seeing Blue. Seeing Blue is a passive ability that will only activate during Last Man Standing. Emmet wields his sword and will now have to 1v1 the killer in a fight to the death. But you might be wondering, how do we force Emmet to 1v1 the killer instead of running away and stalling? And that's simple. The round timer will remain frozen as long as Emmet is not within fighting range of the killer. But what about Brood State, or when Emmet hasn't used his brew yet? If Emmet hasn't used his brew, he will drink it and receive the benefits of Brood State for the rest of the round. What if Emmet doesn't have his brew? If Emmet has used his brew and isn't in Brood State, he's just going to have to fight without the benefits of Brood State. This means that Emmet would have to engage in a 1v1 with base stats if he's already used his Witch's Brew. But how do we prevent Emmet from easily killing a killer who is already pretty beat up from other damage sources? Emmet will do less damage with his swings compared to Seeing Red while in Seeing Blue, but he'll be able to swing faster. I absolutely love this change for Emmet. I think it makes him being the last survivor a lot more interesting and further pushes his specialist role as someone who is designed to deal damage and kill the killer. It also changes how he plays in a small but meaningful way that prevents the fight from feeling unbalanced and cheap. It also somewhat punishes earlier usage of Witch's Brew by not allowing Emmet to simply get another free use of it during Last Man Standing. And it also punishes not using the brew at all by making its utility during Last Man Standing amount to nothing more than a health boost. This enforces the idea that Witch's Brew is a powerful tool that should be used during a round, but only when the time is right. You shouldn't be sitting on it the entire game or using it too early. I believe these changes to the concept make it sound way more fun to play as, against, and alongside. Please let me know in the comments what you guys think of these changes. I think we're close to having a concept here that would work perfectly in Forsaken. Now, let's talk about the characterization of Forsaken Emmet, since it seems like a few people misunderstood what I was going for. Now, I don't blame people for missing what I was trying to go for when characterizing Forsaken Emmet. It's hard to do this when the game doesn't have a lot of ways to actually characterize its characters. I had many people leave comments seemingly brushing off the concept as bro thinks he's on the team, essentially boiling down his character to a cheap self-insert, which was not what I was trying to do. So please, humor me for a moment while I explain how Forsaken Emmet is supposed to be as a character. Forsaken Emmet has some level of imposter syndrome, meaning he doesn't really feel like he belongs alongside the other survivors featured in the game. In-universe, this is because he's essentially just some dude when compared to the other survivors. The only particularly notable aspect of Emmet's history is that he's a mildly popular Robloxian who defeated 2 watered-down versions of 1X and the Horseman. Out of universe, this is because I'm a small YouTuber who would be put in a game with much more historically important Roblox figures. The bro thinks he's on the team-ness of the concept wasn't lost on me. That's why all of the survivors in the thumbnail for the video are looking at me weird. Thankfully, this small bit of characterization wasn't lost on some of the viewers, and I really appreciate that, but for the most part, it seems like people didn't realize that I took that out-of-place nature of me being in Forsaken and I turned it into a small piece of characterization for Emmet. I hope this clears things up, because I understand that the concept being a self-insert is controversial, but the character of Forsaken Emmet is more interesting than just a Mary Sue epic badass guy that everybody loves. In fact, the only survivors with especially positive opinions of Emmet would probably be Elliot and Shedletsky, considering Shedletsky would appreciate what Emmet provides to the survivors, and Elliot can relate to the fact that Emmet isn't anybody particularly special. If there were more opportunities in-game to characterize Emmet, I would have gladly taken them, but unfortunately, it's hard to characterize a concept character for a game where the characters have little to no opportunities to actually receive deeper characterization. The goal when conceptualizing Forsaken Emmet as a character was to have a survivor that represents the modern Roblox events, since the core ideas behind the concept were inspired by my Roblox event videos. He's not some unkillable epic badass guy. Stop pretending like he is simply because he has the ability to fight the killer. With all of that out of the way, I'd really appreciate it if some of you guys would stop brushing off this character simply due to the nature of him being a self-insert. It really undermines the coolest elements of this concept and seemingly boils him down to a parody of what he actually represents. I hope you guys enjoyed this follow-up to the concept and that it addressed any concerns or comments you might have had about the initial version. If you have anything you'd like for me to address or any comments, let me know down in the comments below. But with all that out of the way, I hope you had a good day or night or whenever you're watching this. I've got more content coming down the pipeline real soon, and I'll catch you next time.